What's up YouTube, Quantum Mind 62 here. Years ago, a deck was created. It was one of the many decks that was involving itself with a specific victory variant, if you will. And one of those victory variants was none other than milling the opponent's deck until they had no cards left during their draw phase. This strategy was brought to life by the card known as Morphing Jar number 1. Well, it was originally called Morphing Jar until a new card came into the mix known as Morphing Jar number 2. These two jars would be some of the many jars that would be very infamous to the game itself. These jars actually had faces, and these faces somewhat resembled and could pretty much now be symbolic to the troll face. You know, the troll face meme. Now, the reason I say that is because of the effects. They are all flip effect monsters, meaning that once they're flipped face up by any means necessary, except by ceasefire, their effects activate. Therefore, something extremely stupid happens. Now, for the most part, these effects pretty much help you out and kind of screw over your opponent, but might benefit them. But it mostly benefits you, seeing as how that you're the controller of the card. Now, Deck Out decks was mainly zombie decks specialty, since that's what they revolved around in, sending cards from the opponent's deck to the graveyard, meaning that they were all about deck destruction. Morphing Jar saw to it that he would make the effects go off and make sure that the opponent mills out a lot quicker than any zombie could. Fighting alongside it was Morphing Jar number 2, but this was way later. See, this deck was known as an empty jar deck, meaning that it would just quickly mail out your opponent's, cards from the deck and it would send them to the graveyard. Either they draw them or they would just be sent to the graveyard, meaning that they would have nothing to draw once the draw phase hit. And it's because of that, at this time, the jar was ran at 3. What seemed to help the deck a whole lot more was the release of the 3 books: Book of Taiyu, Book of Eclipse, and Book of Moon. Book of Taiyu would be the one that would be flipping it up, while Book of Eclipse and Book of Moon would flip it back down. Hence, because they were quick play spells, they would automatically chain. But once the Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list was created, one by one, Konami started to ban all the jars. Fiber Jar was the first to get hit, Cyber Jar was the next one, and eventually Morphing Jar would be the one to get hit as well. Now, it wasn't because of Empty Jar. No, it wasn't because of that. Most people hated to play the deck. It required no skill, and it was just a troll deck. Hell, opponents even hated to face it even more. That's pretty understandable. I mean, you're just sitting right there going through an infinite loop until you're pretty much drowning yourself in your own loss. Morphing Jar was still hit. He wasn't banned, but he was limited to 1. And because of that, the Empty Jar deck was slowed down a little bit. But it wasn't necessarily dead altogether. There was still a couple other cards that would help it as well. There was Needleworm that could be ran at 3. And in order to help out the card itself, we had searchers to go for it, such as Sangan, Deep Diver eventually, and as well as AD Changer that could flip it face up if we didn't want to lose it. Because keep in mind, this was our only card. Running 1 copy in the deck was really hard. And in order to keep it alive and making sure that you had to protect it, it would be, it would require so much. And because of that, we had to go through so many resources and make sure we had to protect it at all costs. If you really think about it, Morphing Jar is the Yamato of Empty Jar. Except in this case, you don't sit on it. Instead, you actually have to go through it so many times, and you have to flip it up more than once. When Dark Worlds got a lot more of their support, they started to use Morphing Jar as well. But they did not rely on it as much as they used to when he was used as more than 1. But in the case of Dark Worlds, he was the Raikou of Dark Worlds. Since its limitation, Morphing Jar has been on the run from the ban list as well. Mainly indirectly. See, the one card that could search for an Empty Jar was Sangan. And through various ban lists, the deck itself would take a whole lot of hits. Sangan was one of the many that would have to go. Without Sangan as the main searcher to search for it, we had to settle for Deep Diver. Now, Deep Diver was really slow in the game, mainly because you would not add it to your hand, you would not add the jar to your hand, you would top deck it, place it on the top of your deck, and see if you survive the next turn. The spell card One Day of Peace would also benefit the deck, but that too would eventually get hit by the ban list, limiting it to 1. Me personally, as you guys know, I run the deck, well, used to run the deck now. I just ran it as my answer to the meta. nobody likes playing these type of decks. The same way nobody likes playing against Chainbeat. And it's because of that, again, it was no threat. It didn't do much damage. It just held out on its own, and it was just an answer to the meta when someone was, that upset against the meta. Which case was me. The same way that Empty Jar was the answer to the meta had an answer for Empty Jar. In came the card Jackpot 7. Jackpot 7! Now, Jackpot 7 has not been officially released in the TCG yet, but it has been at the OCG, where it has been doing some damage with and alongside and against Empty Jar. Now, most Empty Jar decks would include just the one Morphing Jar, 2 to 3 Morphing Jar number 2s, the 3 Needleworms as well. What made Jackpot 7 an ally yet an enemy to this deck would be, well, first, the ally. Meaning that if you would be running Empty Jar, you would have to throw in as well as some creature swaps. Now with those creature swaps, you would swap your Morphing Jar with any one of your opponent's monsters. It doesn't matter which one they choose, the jar is theirs now. Now because it's in their possession, you're free to do your shenanigans right there. Meaning that once it's face down, you switch it while it's face down. Book of Taiyu, chain, Book of Eclipse, switch, boom, and Jackpot 7 is sent from the hand or the deck. If you're running Needleworm in this case, it will be sent to the graveyard, banished by that effect. Therefore, once you got 3 of Jackpot 7s banished, like the duel is yours. What made it an enemy was that same reason alone, but without, creature swap. In this case, it would be mained against Empty Jar players, so it would just be sitting in your hand, waiting for your opponent to toss into the graveyard using the jar itself. Or with Morphing Jar number 2. With that, once it's returned, once all the monsters are returned back to the deck, just shuffle, and that will be one of the spells that will be sent to the graveyard via its effect. Now, upon running the deck, the most problems I've had with effect negation, in the case with the Morphing Jar itself, the only problems I've ever had with it was Effect Veiler and Breakthrough Skill. Jackpot 7 is like adding insult to injury on both parties. But what bothers me the most right now is that Empty Jar, like I said, it wasn't really a threat per se, and it wasn't doing damage in any format. Unless Konami's been keeping track of me, but then again, I would not be surprised. I mean, if you see my Photon Rant video, then that's proof enough right there. But what I'm trying to say here is that with the jar being hit now by the ban list, with the ban list being active starting tomorrow, or midnight tonight, it bothers me the fact that they're going to ban it right now before Jackpot 7 makes it over here to the US. Now, I think I speak for all of us TCG players here that we learn from the OCG. Jackpot 7 is no different. Because of that, we knew it was going to happen. This was inevitable. We knew we were going to run it here. All us Empty Jar players were either going to side it, or players who hated us were going to side it against us. So there's really no question about it. This was going to happen one way or another. And, again, I don't get Konami's way of thinking here. Because if you really think about it, why would they hit the jars now? I mean, I can understand if they want to hit it, like, next format, not the one that's starting tomorrow, but the one after. But what I really don't get is that why this time? Like, at least let us enjoy Empty Jar for what it's worth, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of players out there who want to get revenge on this deck, and they will be more than happy to side Jackpot 7. They can wait it out, and we can survive, like, have a format for that alone. Because Jackpot 7 does not come out until, May. If Sixth Sense was already banned in Japan, but you would still let us have it for another month or so over here, knowing full well what it's capable of and what we're gonna do with it, you're telling me that you're willing to let us have that and then ban it, but we won't have Empty Jar for another month and a half? Really? Since when the hell did Konami give a fuck about how we play the game? I thought they were all about money. If they really want to sell that Jackpot 7, then banning it right now is one of the stupidest decisions they could ever make. The card's fucking useless right now. Maybe against artifacts it'll be of some use, but let's be real here. Empty Jar was a quicker deck. in order to activate its effects. Artifacts, on the other hand, are a different story. So, again, Konami is willing to let us live through an even bigger hell with Dragon Ruler formats, with 6 cents, but is willing to not give a flying fuck about Jackpot 7 when it comes to Empty Jar. Dragon Rulers who ruled 2 formats, while Empty Jar was just known as the one nuisance who needed to be put in its place. I don't think the jars should have been hit right now. They should have been hit in the next format instead. Right now they're okay because Empty Jar is no threat. Dragon Rulers were a threat. I don't know how Konami's going to make money off of this card now. I mean, the card's utterly useless. You could try it out against artifacts, see how things go from there, but again, Empty Jar, who do you want to get revenge on, really? Who's the bigger troll deck here? But nonetheless, I moved on. I'm over it. I've mourned, so I'm okay for the most part. So guys, thanks for watching. Let's finish off Empty Jar week with the final farewell to Morphine Jar number 2, as well as Empty Jar, the deck itself. So yeah, I've had a lot of good memories with this deck, and I'm really going to miss it. Despite the hard hits it took, I'm going to miss it, and I'm willing to lay it down to rest. Alright YouTube, let's see what the next format brings us. I'll see you guys in the next video. This is Quantum Knight 62. Thanks for watching. Lights out.